Myles Delfin, thank you so much for joining me today. I am super stoked to have you here. I think you're my first guest from the Philippines, so excited to have that checked off the global map. I got the map behind me, but that one's framed. The one at home has like pins on it that I keep for keeping progress. But for now, I want to hear more about you. Tell me about your background before we hop into the cool stuff. Of like what you're working on. I want to hear kind of where you're coming from and what led you to this idea.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Grant, for the honor of being the first guest that you have in your podcast from the Philippines. So I'm Myles. I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Bike Scouts, but also of a for-profit, which is the technology component called Super Scouts. So I should start from the very beginning, I guess. I used to work as a creative director in the advertising and design industry. So I did that for like my entire professional career. And then in 2013, Typhoon Yolanda happened. Typhoon Haiyan, international name, which was a Category 5 typhoon happened. And I was sitting in my office and I was watching the news. And I saw how people were getting all of the support that they needed in terms of like shelter, food, medicine, and everything else that they needed. But nobody had any access to communication or information. They had no way to reach out to their loved ones. Because here in the Philippines, family is a pretty big thing. And people usually live like within a few towns or villages of each other their entire lives. And so when a typhoon happens, people usually get cut off because the roads get destroyed, the bridges get washed away, and everyone's worried. And it affects sort of like the resilience of people when they have no news of their parents, of their loved ones, of their kids, of their, their relatives and friends. And so back then, when I was younger, I also used to race mountain bikes. So I did cross-country mountain bike racing. I did adventure races. And so I was thinking that maybe I can use my cycling experience and use that to help people that was affected by the typhoon. So I thought, okay, I have an idea. I used to call it Typhoon Telegrams. Typhoon Telegrams because the idea was very simply that we would use our bicycles to help people sort of like send letters or notes to their loved ones. Because if the roads are washed out, if access is restricted, the bicycles could still get through, and we would carry these messages and deliver to them the letters and the notes to their families. And so that was the original idea. But then when we took a C-130 flight, a Philippine Air Force flight to ground zero of Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, and when we got there, the situation was way worse than we imagined. And so we realized, I quickly realized that we had to do a lot more than just deliver messages. And so that's how the Bike Scouts started. So our work shifted from just merely delivering letters and notes to actually gathering information and data, disaster data, and finding out where people have relocated to, have sort of like evacuated to. And then sharing that with NGOs, with rescue groups, and everyone else, so that their work would be far more efficient, as opposed to if they were working on the ground at these disaster areas with zero information. And so for the past 11 years, actually, we've been around for 11 years, Bike Scouts as a nonprofit community has grown from a team. Originally, we only had 200 volunteers. So we worked for 4 months on the ground in the places that was affected by Typhoon Yolanda. But 11 years on, we've grown to over 100,000 community members here in the Philippines. So we're nationwide. In every village, in every town and city, there are Bike Scouts. And all of them have been, the amazing thing for me is that without actually telling the members of the Bike Scouts community what to do, they sort of like just watched the video, I guess, and read about what the Bike Scouts did during Typhoon Yolanda, and they took it from there. They took the cue. And then they started doing things in their own communities. They sort of like organize their own projects, organize their own teams. And it's not just during in the aftermath of disasters that they get to work, but even on a daily basis, they would just find something that they could do to help others, and they would do that as a team without even asking for help from anyone else, without sponsorship, without funding. They would do stuff like that. And so that's what we've been doing for the past 11 years. But then, because we mainly operated on Facebook and Messenger, and just for context, here in the Philippines, Facebook and Messenger is like the internet. It's a very big deal. Everyone is on Messenger. It's sort of like it's our telephone even, and so everyone's there. And so that's why it made sense for the Bike Scout to start on Facebook and Messenger. And until now, we're still there. We have like a few dozen group chats, and we have pages and group pages and stuff like that, to the point that in 2021, we actually got noticed by Meta, the parent company of Facebook, and they invited us to join their community accelerator program, and we actually won that. So we did get a little bit of funding from Meta, and we did get support from them. We got invited to their headquarters in Singapore, and I actually had a few great meetings with their engineers, and we sort of like contributed to the things that they wanted to learn, how to build better communities and how to improve their products, like for Messenger and Instagram and other stuff. And so it was a great experience. But then moving forward, I also realized that not all of the work that the Bike Scouts does, that the Bike Scouts community does, fits into sort of like the community guidelines of Facebook. Because we do work in disasters, we do work in emergency situations, and there are a lot of times when the community members would be sharing like photos and videos of people that they wanted to help, and sometimes it gets flagged on Facebook for some reason. And so that's when we decided maybe we should start building our own platform for this kind of thing, and so we did, but we didn't have any money. So that's the thing. So I reached out to people in our own community, in the Bike Scouts community, just in case there was anyone who was interested to help build an actual platform. And there was actually a person, and he happened to have an entire dev team. And so we built an AI and blockchain enabled app. It's actually, we've just gone through beta, and now we're about to relaunch it in its better format. And then in addition to that, because we've had 11 years of experience working in disaster areas, we also realized that the app alone would not be enough. And so we also built our own mesh network devices, our own mesh network, basically, for resilient connectivity, so that even if like mobile service fails, we would still be connected, even at least through messaging. And then
for a second,
yes.
So two things I want to say before we go on. You're saying a lot of great things.
Sorry.
First one for the American audience, when he says typhoon, we tend to call them hurricanes. And I'm from Houston. We have a lot of hurricanes in Houston, so we're very well versed on that and disaster relief there. But you also mentioned one thing that's very important that a lot of people don't know is, I think here in the US, we're very much used to like instant messenger and texting as the main forms of communication. But around the rest of the world, it like either like countries have specific apps that they have, like Japan has Line app that a lot of people use, or most of Europe and kind of the rest of most of Europe kind of uses what are they?
Telegram.
There's Telegram, and then there's WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. Yeah.
WhatsApp is one of the most popular ones around the world. And then like China has WeChat. But it's very interesting that you said y'all use Facebook Messenger. I would not have guessed that. But tell me more about this mesh network. What do you mean by that? How does that work?
Well, mesh network, it's actually existing technology. It's not something that we created ourselves. So it's basically just radio frequency that transmits data. So it's a very small device that consumes like very little power, and it's continuously operating. So that if like mobile service goes down, then this your mobile phones using our app specifically, you can connect to these mesh network devices, and it will sort of like transmit the text messaging that you would be sending through our app to other members of the community. So in that way, we're trying to build sort of like resilient connectivity, because the problem here in the Philippines, I don't know if it's the same thing in the US and other countries, but here in the Philippines, a little bit of rain, a little bit of lightning and thunder, and we lose electricity immediately. It shuts down. And the worst thing is that a lot of the substations, the stations that sort of like distribute the electrical power from the grid, they're not in the best location. So a lot of them get flooded. And so sometimes, like if it's a really bad hurricane, for weeks or maybe even like a couple of months, the power would be out because while they're repairing the substation and other things that get damaged. So yeah, so that's basically what it's about.
Gotcha. Definitely. I'd like to hear more kind of specific. Give me a few kind of just brag on yourself for a little bit. Give me some great stories of people kind of getting their messages or getting things via these Bike Scouts.
Yeah, like very recently, and I'm not sure if like the American audience can imagine this, but we recently, like in a span of a month, we got around 7 hurricanes, one after the other. So in a span of like a few days, one hurricane after another, would make landfall in the Philippines or impact the Philippines. And the hurricanes alone, they're like category 3, category 4, category 5, different strengths for the hurricanes that arrive here. But the problem is that the Philippines, most of the land area of the Philippines is actually prone to flooding, landslides, and a lot of sort of like mini disaster events that happen because of like rain. Once it starts raining in the highlands, everything like just like what happened in Spain, it just cascades down into the lowlands, and a lot of our cities, actually 75% of our population are located in very disaster-prone areas, which is why the Philippines is, well, we consistently rank as number 1 most disaster-vulnerable country in the world.
Really? I didn't know that. Well, there's that. But do you have any specific stories about people kind of like getting their messages or? Yeah,
definitely. Well, during this time where we were experiencing the 7 consecutive hurricanes, we were getting a lot of messages from people asking for rescue. And the reason we were getting the messages from the people who needed help and not government agencies is because the government actually sent out, within hours of the first storm happening, they've already sent out a notice to the public that they're already overwhelmed, that they don't have enough rescuers, they don't have equipment. And it's not really because of inefficiency or a lack of capability, but it's just a lack of budget, a lot of lack of like funding for even our local government units in the provinces, especially. They don't get a lot of support, and so they might have maybe 2-3 rubber boats, for example, and they might have a few dozen rescuers in a city of like maybe a couple of million. So just looking at the proportion of the rescuers to the people who might be calling for help, and there would be a lot every time a flooding happens. There was this one instance where we were getting live footage from one of our volunteers of a man clinging to a coconut tree, and in the middle, and this tree was in the middle of like raging torrent of like flood water. I believe it used to be a small river, but it became almost like I don't know, I would say a sea of like very violent, like brown, and you can imagine what a flash flood looks like. And he was there for 2 hours, and they were trying to get rescue, but of course there wasn't any rescue that was coming. And so eventually the people who were watching him from a safe distance managed to locate this man's relatives, and then they found a boat, and they managed to do the rescue themselves. And so over the past 11 years, we've seen this happen over and over again. The same thing, different people, different stories, different situations, but the same situation. People who need help, they rely on what we call top-down solutions, top-down approach to resilience. Like especially here in the Philippines, we're sort of like engineered to depend on help coming from the government and other agencies. But a lot of times it fails because there's just not enough capacity. And so in the Bike Scouts, we like to say that the only real way to match the scale of the need for help and hope in the midst of disasters is really if people in their own communities would be able to take action. And the requirement for that is to give people the knowledge, the skill, the tools, the network of support, so that they can do exactly what they are already doing, as in the case of this man who was rescued by his own relatives, his own friends. And they did that without proper tools, without proper training, without proper knowledge of how to do it. But imagine if we can equip, like I'm talking about in the context of the Philippines, of course, because here in the Philippines, we don't have a FEMA. We can't just call in helicopters to do rescues. I know that even in Spain, they have that. They can just call in a helicopter. In Japan, they also have that. But here, we have a very limited resource. And so that's why Bike Scouts has been pushing very hard to, really promote giving knowledge, skills, tools, and network of support for people in their own communities.
I love it, man. Dude, sounds like you're doing great work down there. I just want to wrap up with one more kind of question, kind of pulling out a little bit. For most of my audience is American, Canadian, European. For people who don't really know a whole lot about what's happening in the Philippines, or might be interested in opening a business there or moving there for work, what would you say to them? What would you, say as like an intro to the Philippines, or what they should know when moving there, or what the entrepreneurial community is like?
Okay, let me start by talking about the people, of course. People who have been here, non-Filipinos, they would immediately tell you that Filipinos are the friendliest people in the world. And of course, being Filipino, I would agree to that.
A little biased, but that's all right.
People from outside the Philippines would normally be familiar with Thailand. They would be familiar with other countries around us, like even Malaysia, Singapore, but not the Philippines. The Philippines is an archipelago. So if you're looking for like beaches, you're looking for like islands that you want to explore, if you're into sailing, this would be the perfect place. We get a lot of sort of like bad publicity internationally in terms of like security and all of those things. And yes, we do have those problems just like any other country in the world, but those security problems are actually limited to a small part of the country that's far away from, where people usually hang out. And one of the great advantages of being in the Philippines is that we're English speaking, basically. You can go anywhere. You can talk to any kid on the street, on the beach, and they would be able to communicate with you in English. Some of my American friends who have been traveling for the first time outside of the U.S. Call it as a kind of a cheat if you're going to go to Asia, because if you go to Thailand and other places, of course they're great places, but then you would be struggling with the language barrier. In the Philippines, and this is like a good thing and a bad thing. Some Americans say that it almost feels like they've never left America, because all of the American brands you will find here, like Randy's Donuts, Denny's, like basically everything. If you go to the supermarket, it's basically American brands. They're very, very Americanized because, of course, the Philippine history, America stayed here for a very long time. We were almost like a Hawaii, because World War II, of course, the U.S. Liberated the Philippines from Japanese occupation, and so most of our culture, most of our
MacArthur.
Exactly, MacArthur. You have the perfect book. That would be the best.
Yeah, he loved the Philippines, and he had a famous quote where he had to leave because the Japanese were coming, and they ordered him out, and he said, "I will return," and he took his word and fought the Japanese back. So. Yeah.
I mean, like sort of like if I can add a little bit more to the sort of like language advantage of the Philippines, we're not as developed in terms of like entrepreneurship and startups and technology and innovation as other countries like Singapore and Malaysia. But the thing about the Philippines is that it's an untapped market, and we have capable people. We're very quick to learn, and so if like someone's going to set up sort of like a startup here, even like a tech-driven business, I would say that this would be the perfect place, because people are willing to learn, people are willing to work, and you don't have a lot of competition yet. Unlike if you go to like more developed places, but we do have the basic infrastructure, of course. That's the other thing that a lot of other people from outside the Philippines sometimes get to hear, that we don't have internet or something. Like we do have internet. It's not as probably as good as what you have in the US, but it's good enough, I think.
If you're setting now you have things like Starlink, where you can just set up an internet anywhere in the world that can see the sky. So quickly those barriers are kind of being disintegrated.
We're actually using Starlink for our disaster response. So
perfect. Yeah, I mean it sounds like I don't know. You say it's not, as entrepreneurial as the other places, but I think it sounds perfect for entrepreneurship to get started there. So sounds like a lot of opportunity to me. But Myles, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and learn about the great work you're doing in the Philippines. And I hope to come visit you someday soon.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.